Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Agatha All Along, Episode 7, Death's Hand in Mine. A brilliantly constructed episode that reframes this entire series as a masterful act of divination by a forgotten witch. The fact that you've been on this road with us makes me have to say, I love you guys. There's so much to analyze here, from Easter eggs and details you missed to really just the intricately wound clockwork that makes this episode tick. And yeah, you probably noticed I'm wearing the same shirt worn by Agatha last episode from Ralph's Family Reunion, which you can pitch a tent yourself and grab from our merch store, nerdriot.shop. You know you want one either for yourself or as a great holiday gift for that special nerd in your life. All right, let's get started. This episode's title is Death's Hand in Mine, an obvious setup for the big confirmation this episode that Ria Vidal is in fact Mistress Death, the ex-lover whose hand Agatha has been holding from the beginning. The phrase comes from the beginning of the second verse of the Ballad of the Witch's Road, marching ever forward neath the wooded shrine. I stray not from the path, I hold death's hand in mine. We learn this episode that all paths lead to death. Death is the ultimate destination for us all. It comes soonest for Lilia this episode, and I think we learn that there is a comfort in death accompanying us from the beginning, a sort of relief that we don't have to be in control of our destinies. We just have to accept and to be able to see this journey. I'm reminded of the tale of the three brothers in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where the cleverest brother hides from death with a cloak of invisibility until he and death can finally depart from this life as equals. That's where I feel Lilia really ends her journey this episode, a 450-year-old witch who hid from death her entire life, finally reaching relief and closing the loop of her very confusing life. But the opening seconds show Lilia in extreme close-up, her eyes awakening in a state of panic from this interesting hazy yellow filter with some dark shadow moving in it. What is this shadow? Is it the silhouette of the prophesied Scarlet Witch when she appeared to her younger self in the yellow glow of the Mind Stone? The witch that Lilia might have foreseen if she placed a sigil on William Kaplan and Billy Maximoff, knowing that he would be Wanda's son and sent the Scarlet Witch elsewhere on a desperate search that would lead to her destruction? Or is the shadow in the yellow glow the part of the witch's road that Billy tossed her out of? Is it the warm Sicilian sun over her lessons with her Maestra? Or is it the murky yellow glow that surrounded her Maestra in her death vision in episode 3, where Mistress Death made her first appearance, that Death really recreates for Lilia in this episode? I think it's all of these things, but above all, it's just death. But not a painful, violent death, a gentle embrace, a gray rain curtain rolling back, revealing a swift sunrise. Or perhaps what the youngest Peveril brother saw when he unveiled himself from under that cloak to join Death's friendly embrace. Maybe I just have Deathly Hallows on the brain because, well, an announcement here for lovers of all things witchcraft and wizardry. Starting Saturday, November 9th, New Rockstars will embark upon a new road, a Harry Potter rewatch. Every week, we're gonna have super in-depth analyses of each of the 8 Harry Potter films from 2001 to 2011. We rewatch these movies every year during the holidays, and for years, a lot of you have been requesting us to revisit them with proper Easter egg breakdowns. We actually have a lot to say about the legacy of this franchise and our complex feelings that we've had growing up with them. So subscribe for an epic rewatch series to end 2024. We see Lilia falling through an endless black void, looking a lot like Chris in Jordan Peele's Get Out, falling into the sunken place. That's really how she has felt during these lapses of consciousness throughout her life, and her goal is to realize what she is falling through, and to realize that she's not falling down, but falling up, like Miles Morales' iconic upward dive in Into the Spider-Verse. Lilia is dressed as Glinda the Good Witch of the North in The Wizard of Oz. Ironically, Glinda is not the witch who defies gravity. Glinda comes and goes by Bubble.
We can't all come and go by Bubble.
Agatha and Billy are now walking the road, just the two of them.
I'll get a nosebleed trying that hard to read my mind.
In WandaVision episode 7, when Agatha babysat Billy and Tommy, Billy was also unable to read her mind.
It's because it's quiet. You're quiet, Agnes.
And Agatha also refers to herself as Billy's old babysitter in this scene. Agatha seems almost desperate for Billy to ask her questions, to be dependent on her. But when Billy does start to ask questions, we cut away from Joe Locke and Catherine Hahn's faces.
Okay then, where's Rio?
Not that question.
Makes me wonder if this exchange might have been picked up in an ADR session and originally could have been a different question or questions that were asked. This is the first time we've seen the back of Billy's sweater in close-up. Joe Locke has said that this shows amazingly talented costume designer Daniel Salon stitched the Scarlet Witch's crown on the back of Billy's sweater, and I think you can see it here on the upper right shoulder blade region. Agatha says Billy bought a ticket to ride on this witch's road. Last week in an interview with the Rap head writer Jack Schaefer said that the black heart text that Billy received from Eddie was a confirmation that Billy is is indeed the black heart that Lilia drew on her list of names for this coven, and that it's actually Rio, aka Death, who is the tourist of this group. Agatha claims to be Billy's mom's ex-best friend. Saw what you did there. And Billy pushes back. She's not my mom. I already have a mom. Ever since Billy entered William Kaplan's body with hardly any memories of the hex, he had to piece together his link to Wanda and Vision from Ralph Boner, so it makes sense that Rebecca Kaplan is the most maternal figure that he would know. Though, for all of you who worship at the altar of Mother Scarlet Witch, this is pretty hard to hear, and this boy needs to be put in time out. The way he says, I have a mom, though, also feels pointed at Agatha, like he's trying to dig at her own mommy issues with the absent mother figure Evanora Harkness, absent because she killed her. And remember, Evanora said in front of everyone else that Agatha was born evil and that she wishes she killed her the moment she left her body. Yeah, we're not forgetting that one. But Billy takes the bait and asks if Wanda Maximoff is really dead.
Yes. No. Maybe.
Okay, come on. Last episode, it made it seem like this show really wants us to think that Wanda is permanently dead as a form of expectation management for the episodes to come. But now, as we're just looking ahead to one more finale week, it seems like Marvel might be wanting to keep the door open for a possible return of Wanda beyond this show. Billy asks if Agatha saw a body.
Yes, I did.
Did anybody else?
It's hard to say.
Now, the music here are the 3 notes of the WandaVision credits theme from composer Christoph Beck that we pointed out in episode 5 when Agatha told Billy, "You're so much like your mother," and raked his chin. The corpse that Agatha saw, though, which we did not see the face of, is what she's referring to here. We just cannot fully trust this answer because this corpse only appeared within Agatha's illusion when she was under the spell. Agatha wasn't there at Mount Bunagor. Who knows what she was really looking at over by the creek in the water? But it is a common rule in TV shows and films, unless you see a body and unless you see the life go out of that character's eyes, they ain't dead. Agatha ends this chat.
Hey, you want straight answers? Ask a straight lady.
Along with I'm your mom's ex-best friend, and Billy joking that he's the querent instead of the querent. It's just nice to see this series knows its audience and really just trusts its audience to let it be itself. The leaves of the Witch's Road are now yellow, making it an appropriate yellow brick road. The trees around them here look especially menacing and graspy, like the terrifying trees that throw apples at Dorothy and Scarecrow. Seriously, I would always fast forward through that part. I don't like his voice, I don't like his face, I don't like his twisty stump, I don't like the way he manhandled Judy Garland, I don't like that he tore chunks of his own flesh off of his body to hurl his projectiles. It's like some psycho pulling out his teeth and throwing them at you. I don't like it. The next trial is a large medieval castle, which seems to confirm my theory that each of the trial's locations are the homes, or a place inspired by the home, of the witch who was on trial that episode, filled with something they don't like. So Jen was in a Martha's Vineyard beach mansion filled with poison wine. Alice was in Lorna Woo's recording studio home, and it was filled with Lorna's generational cursed demon. Agatha was in her Salem cabin, and it was filled with girlfriend sleepover bullshit. And now Lilia is in her 16th century Sicilian castle filled with pop culture witch cosplaying, designed to irk her stance against the Halloween industrial complex. Billy brings up the theory that we posed before that Agatha might never have actually been down the Witch's Road at all. I think Billy might know that because much of the decor of the Witch's Road are things inspired by things in his bedroom in William Kaplan's life. Like he's saying that for one to truly to be experienced in the Witch's Road would mean that you would have to offer one's own creativity to help manifest these settings instead of, just showing up to these parties that someone else planned and designed, which Agatha has totally been doing. Agatha looks truly shaken by Billy's accusation. I think she might have entered the Witch's Road, but never completed it, or took an escape hatch. Maybe she even used death to complete her final trial for her. Billy and Agatha walk up the road toward the castle, and it's cool to consider that this castle beyond the ridge on the set is probably not VFX. I think it's a practical miniature that they built on the set. So based on the scale of the shot, it's probably like a model that's just like 12 or 15 feet tall with holes for the windows lit from behind. The drawbridge shows this stage of the moon, a waxing gibbous, we call this. A waxing gibbous is meant to represent a time of refinement or preparation, a developmental stage, something coming to fruition. And while for Lilia, her trial is meant to close the loop on her own cycling, for the coven as a whole, her clarity allows her to give them all the key advice to prepare for the road ahead. So to recap, in episode 3, Jen's trial, the beach mansion, that was a full moon. Episode 4, Alice's trial, the recording studio, that was a waxing crescent. Episode 5, Agatha's trial, the cabin sleepover, that was a blood moon. And episode 7, Lilia's trial at the castle, this is a waxing gibbous. So based off of what's left, unless they give Billy's trial a quarter moon or flip to the waning side instead of the waxing, I think Billy's trial will be a new moon, the darkest time in the lunar cycle. I love this smooth transition as Agatha and Billy push open the doors, the camera glides in behind them, and now Billy is dressed as Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, and Agatha as the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz, with a pointed chin and nose like what Margaret Hamilton wore. Agatha and Billy do this performative turn and pose, both framed perfectly in the beams of light formed by the windows. When you rewatch this episode, just look at what Catherine Hahn is doing with her hands. There's always interesting choices being made with the hands. Agatha says,
She's based on me,
So L. Frank Baum published The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in 1900. Agatha could be referring to that, especially since we know there's going to be a version of her during the Victorian era. There's a chance that she met Baum. But the MGM film that she's specifically dressed as here came out in 1939. And based on Agatha's look, I assume she's referring to Margaret Hamilton's look and performance. So presumably after surviving the Titanic and the Hindenburg, Agatha made her way to Hollywood and really did a number on Victor Fleming or Louis B. Mayer, which now lets us add to her list of offenses, not doing more to help Judy Garland and all the other young starlets who were suffering in the industry at this time. Maybe Agatha even contributed to that suffering. Here, Judy, take these uppers. Costume designer Daniel Salem posted on Instagram that since Warner owns the rights to the 1939 Victor Fleming Wizard of Oz film and Maleficent and the Evil Witch from Snow White are obviously Disney animation, they still had to customize the designs to make them unique enough and get these studios to clear the costumes. Notice Agatha's witch hat has a buckle and a stiffly angled brim with purple lace on it. Margaret Hamilton's did not. And Agatha wears a purple trim black jacket, which Hamilton did not. I assume they also had to do the pointed chin and nose to avoid any possible conflict with the Wicked musical Elphaba version of the character, whose stage and film rights belong to Universal. Don't ever let this hat shadow Agatha's eyes. She will get very offended. On the side of the dais is carved, "Your path winds out of time." And I love the wordplay here because to wind out of time kind of implies a clock winding down and losing time. Every trial is on a fixed timer and this one uses an hourglass, but also to wind out of time also implies a path winding spatially in and out of a linear understanding of time and the way Lilia's path defies normal chronology. Obviously, your path winds out of time will be what Lilia repeats at the end of this episode when she realizes she has to be the traveler. Beneath the English letters appear to be some symbols. Later, when we see an overhead shot of the table, we see these symbols match the one on the outer ring at the top, showing the astrological zodiac symbols, and an inner ring showing the lunar phases. Billy picks up the tarot cards. That's what starts the countdown. And once again, it's Billy picking up the object that starts the trial. The welcome card, the album, the Ouija board, and now the stack of tarot cards. Agatha says, "There's no time like the present," which echoes what Lilia told William.
Enjoy the now, baby. It's the only thing that's certain.
Billy draws the first card.
The horse-drawn carriage.
The chariot?
Yeah.
It's literally written on the card.
Ha! Billy, as a Disney kid who would appreciate Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, remember the 838 Billy and Tommy were watching Snow White in Multiverse of Madness, this would be the term used by someone with Cinderella on the brain. But Billy bullshits his interpretation, saying the chariot means Agatha is fleeing something and the sphinxes represent her mysteriousness. In actuality, the chariot tarot card, facing up as it is here, represents success, ambition, determination, willpower, control, self-discipline, and focus. Billy did have a pack of tarot cards in his bedroom in episode 6, but it is clear that he hasn't really taken the time to fully learn this discipline. Swords dangle loosely over the heads. These are a reference to the swords of Damocles. Damocles switched places with Dionysus, getting to be king and getting everything he could have ever wanted, but the sword hung above his head, and he realized he didn't want that life. Dionysus wanted to prove that with great power is often accompanied by great fear. So neither Billy nor Agatha want to be in this hot seat. Next, Billy draws the Seven of Swords, which Billy says is about deception and betrayal, except Billy flipped it upside down, which he says means the opposite of that, speculating that Agatha is being truthful, except no, Billy, you're wrong. Reversed, the Seven of Swords actually means imposter syndrome, self-deceit, keeping secrets, and that is literally what Billy is exemplifying here by posing as an expert. Agatha takes charge and begins flipping cards seemingly at random, even chanting "Eeny, meeny, miny, mo." We do get a shot of all the cards that Agatha pulled. Looks like the order in which she pulled is this: the Five of Wands, then the Two of Wands, then the World, the Page of Swords, Wheel of Fortune, the Hanged Man, and the Ten of Swords. We could go into the meaning of these, but really, since Agatha threw them out randomly as almost a kind of mockery, I think you could just look into the meaning elsewhere on your own. So more swords fall, the table turns, and the whole ceiling begins to lower. Very Temple of Doom. And Billy says,
I wish Lilia was here.
and as if willing her into existence of this episode's editing, we cut to Lilia's eyes opening as she is still reacting to the opening shots we saw her in of her falling.
I was falling.
So here's obviously where things get really interesting in this episode. Heading into episode 7, I speculated that this series might be structuring Lilia Calderou like the character of Desmond Hume in Lost, specifically the famous season 4 episode The Constant, in which Desmond's consciousness becomes unstuck in time, flashing around to different eras of his life as he struggles to get a grip on reality before his mind scrambles and he dies. A warning sign being what Agatha said at the start of this episode, a nosebleed. It seems as though that theory was correct. Yay! However, I must say this episode is actually doing something far more technical logical. The constant was an emotional character arc that preached the healing power of love that also deepened the lore of the Lost series. Death's Hand in Mine is more of a puzzle box that connects the dots of really every unexplained phenomena of Lilia Calderu's character. Something closer, I would say, to the big twist in Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House, the end of episode 5, the bent neck lady, where a character that we had been following upon her death is revealed to be a ghost that we had been seeing at several key moments, and we revisit each of those moments from her perspective, with her falling, as Lilia does, through the floors of each past memory. And I also brought up this episode of Haunting of Hill House in sneak peek last Sunday, so yay! But what really makes this special for Lilia are the themes that this ambitious structural device delivers, which are actually, I would say, contrary to the constant and the bent neck lady, and I'll get to those at the end of this analysis. This episode's writers, Gia King and Cameron Squires, had to both understand the objective chronology of Lilia's journey, but reorder it in a way so that she would react to her spontaneously leaping path in real time according to her point of view, and that point of view forms her character arc as she reaches her catharsis through the course of her trial in the weird curved path that she takes. And each step of that cathartic journey needs to be driven by emotional heightening and discovery and just her own accumulation of knowledge. So it's not just random jumping. This is not an easy script to write, and they nailed it. So right here in this moment, when Lilia said she was falling, she's talking about her fall at the end of this episode, which a moment earlier she could only see as taking place in a dark void and couldn't yet discern the context of that fall or even the actual direction of that fall. But Jen assumes that she's talking about the fall that they had shared minutes before this, down into this tunnel from the mud that Billy threw them into. Between that splat and now, there was some other conversation between Lilia and Jen. We learned it was a future Lilia looping back to that muddy tunnel moments before to inform Jen that the teen was Wanda's son, but it actually comes as news to Lilia now.
Teen is the son of the Scarlet Witch? How do you know? I told you.
Now, the framing of this dialogue in these Lilia scenes places the actors in the center of frame, which is a Wes Anderson type style that creates this awkward comedic tension. But for Lilia, it's also a way that this episode shows her perspective as she focuses directly on the words of the person she is talking to, does not get distracted by the periphery around them, and really just struggles to link these puzzle pieces of conversations from different moments. Jen says,
"You're being extra wispy.
Wispy?
Kooky.
Which is it? Am I wispy or am I kooky?
nice. This is one of the non sequitur lines that Lilia said to Alice in episode 4.
Which is it? Am I wispy or am I kooky?
But while Patti LuPone said it as a frenetic outburst in episode 4, now episode 7 contextualizes it as just like a kind of moody response to Jen in the tunnel in the previous moment. This episode depicts time slipping with camera movements. The first one is a lateral pan, which helps orient the viewer to see this transition as like the turning of a page, or even just turning our head to someone else in the conversation. But then they use a creepy dolly zoom on the next slippage, which shows how Lilia is now terrified by what's happening as she pieces together two moments that we actually assembled in our episode 5 breakdown.
Alice, don't try to save Agatha.
Lilia, as we suspected, was relieved to see Alice alive again and instinctively tried to warn her to not use her powers to save Agatha in episode 5. But it's too late. The sentence actually just finishes with Agatha back in episode 3.
Try to save Agatha.
Yes, I love this plan.
The exact wrong person to give this message to. This idea of consciousness displacement is a form of time travel that I have categorized in past New Rockstars videos as Type 7, aka Unstuck Mind. Before Desmond on Lost, Kurt Vonnegut played with this concept in Slaughterhouse 5 with the character of Billy Pilgrim. It's also the form of time travel used by Wolverine in X-Men Days of Future Past, which gets a musical reference at the end of this episode. And if you watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., there was the character of Robin Hinton who had a similar condition. In this instance, it really adheres to the MCU's general philosophy when it comes to time travel, what I have actually called Type 4, this always happened, aka destiny, predestination, fate. It means that there is a fixed destiny for all characters and that any steps they take in their lives to travel back in time, either through their bodies or just their minds, doesn't change the past. It just kind of fulfills their own destiny and justifies the past to be what it was always going to be. Never mind the branch realities mumbo jumbo of Avengers Endgame. Even those screenwriters couldn't fully commit to it because they insist that old man Steve Rogers at the end of the movie had lived his whole life in the background of the same MCU history the whole time we were watching phases 1, 2, and 3.
The whole time?
We all instinctively want to narrativize our own lives as being fated in some way. That's how we derive meaning. Unstuck Mind, though, is my favorite form of fictional time travel because it suggests that it's not us who change history, but rather history that changes us by giving us new insight as we dwell on it. It reflects the way our minds work every day as we zone out and just relive memories that we are ultimately powerless to change. Lilia loops back to her Maestra, played by Laura Boccialetti, whom we saw in episode 3 in that horrifying vision. Lilia is now in the body of her young self, played by Chloe Camp, whom we also saw in that episode. This garden looks like the same tea table that made up Lilia's vision in episode 3, except now you'll notice it's all full of life and free from the shadow of death. The Maestra says, "Ah, you're visiting," as she can sense that the girl she was just talking to now has a consciousness of a witch over 400 years older. We pan from a young Lilia to the Maestra, then back to old Lilia, and it seems like they really just swapped out Chloe for Patty in the same take. Being served a targeted ad happens so frequently that we forget how they're able to target us. It's because whenever you go online, you're creating a data profile that's like a warped version of you. Data brokers can take that data, package it, and sell it to whoever they want. But Delete Me can help you take that data back. Delete Me is a hands-free subscription service that helps you reduce the risks of identity theft and scams by removing your data from hundreds of data broker sites. Delete Me works all year long to remove things like your name, address, email address, phone number, and more from data broker sites, and they're constantly adding new features and updating their removal targets to help you get back control over your personal data. It's super easy to use. You take 5 minutes to submit your info to Delete Me. Their experts comb through the internet looking for places your data shouldn't be, and then they remove it and send you a report on what they've done. Get 20% off Delete Me consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/rockstars and use promo code rockstars at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/rockstars and use code rockstars. Thank you, Delete Me, for sponsoring this video. The Maestra says that Lilia is back in her first lesson, tea leaf reading, which Lilia claims she was never good at. A narrative, the Maestra says, that Lilia has always told herself but is not true. She calls it the easy road, as if knowing that Lilia is currently on a road of a different kind. A complex episode structure like this requires the bones of the act structure to be quite rigid so that the viewer doesn't get lost. And so this first visit to the Maestra is really the first of 3 visits that designate the acts of this episode. Like this meeting is followed by a loop back to Jen in the tunnel, and then Lilia joining Agatha and Billy in the castle, then flashing to an even more chaotic memory trip, then back to the Maestra for a second time, then back to the tunnel with Jen, then back in the castle where Lilia takes charge of the tarot lesson. But it's not enough. She has to go through a final chaotic memory trip that takes her back to the Maestra for a 3rd time, and then finally opens Lilia's eyes to the moment she initially splatted down with Jen, had all the answers, and realized that she needed to be the Queen of Cups she was always meant to be, which lines all the pieces in place and solves the trial just in time for Lilia to invert the tower and defeat the Salem 7. Again, that is 3 visits to the Maestra, each about 5 minutes apart in this episode's runtime for the 3 acts of Lilia's journey. And that's how the script takes us on this wild trip without us feeling too lost. It's actually a very organized episode. But the Maestra discounting Lilia being bad at tea leaves is actually justified here, as Lilia gazes downward at the muddy leaves and the camera swoops down into the muddy tunnel. Really, this whole trial is just a simple act of the Maestra teaching young Lilia her very first lesson. She needed her future older self to hop into her past body to be able to look down at those leaves and to see more experience and meaning, to have the broken chunks of her life only older women would know, to steer her past self to be able to read tea leaves and become the Queen of Cups. Kind of like Wanda needing that vision of her future self in the glow of the Mind Stone radiation to gain certainty of her destiny and to know that she can do this. All witches need that guidance from their future selves. Now, when Lilia returns to the tunnel with Jen, she's frustrated to learn just more context that her slightly future self will know, but not her present self yet, that there is a subway station somewhere in these tunnels, and that the Salem 7 are near. We need to feel Lilia sinking deeper into confusion and despair before she can crawl her way out, but it leads to Lilia to clarify a rule for the MCU.
The flow of time is an illusion, Jen. Most people don't realize that.
Lilia is giving her take on what the Loki series established, specifically in the season 1 finale, which included this opening audio sample as we were flying back through the galaxy.
We think of time as a one-way movie.
This is a quote from Alan Watts' 1972 lecture on time, wherein Watts explains how human beings are only able to see time as linear, when in reality, events from the past and the future could be happening all at once. This line from Lilia establishes that MCU characters whose wisdom is rooted in sorcery, or maybe just a technology so advanced it's basically the same as sorcery, the quantum theory of infinite universes is not true, that we are all actually living on fixed predestined life paths that, if our consciousness ever allows us to step away and look back on that path, we could hop around and re-experience different moments of that path. Lilia explains that when she was a child, she experienced her life out of sequence, but only now those gaps have returned and they're getting worse. We have to wonder if the reason Lilia experienced those flashes only as a kid is this journey on the road right now, looping back only to her early youth to give that girl the skills that she would need as a beginner witch to set her on that life path. Like that would explain why Lilia would become unstuck only at the beginning and at the end of her life and not in between. A really cool visual detail here, when we cut back to Jen, the yellow root behind her winds behind her head as if to show that she is still witnessing time in its normal linear form, whereas Lilia Lilia, and the framing of the scene is removed from the yellow roots in the background, kind of like saying that she is detached from any kind of flow of time. Jen asks if being at the end means her full powers are returning, and Lilia says,
I'm not so sure I want it.
Lilia's consciousness leads to being pinned by Agatha in the castle. Why is Agatha on top of her? Well, we will see later in this episode as Lilia is explaining the tarot board, a sword will fall directly over Lilia's chair, and Agatha will jump to tackle her to save her right before the next lapse begins. We'll come back to this moment. So Lilia has leapt past the moment she and Jen found the castle through the bookshelves, so that Lilia is now just there in her Glinda the Good Witch costume, and Jen is dressed as the evil witch from Snow White, who has appeared in the closing credits of every episode. But from present Lilia's point of view, since this is the first time she's seen Billy since he plunged her into the mud, she rightfully accosts him.
We are not cool, teenager.
Damn, using his full name.
It's a solid joke, teen being like his given name, teenager being his first and last name. Billy defends himself, saying that he didn't know he could use his power. Joe Locke and Jack Schaefer have suggested that part of Billy's powers coming from Wanda Maximoff means emotional outbursts that just cause collateral damage like this. But Billy begins to dialogue with just the thoughts that are in Lilia's head.
If I'd have known, I would have... Yes, of course. I would have used it to save Alice.
I love how much Lilia mourns Alice. Like, her go-to thought during this moment was one of the first messages she said while she was time slipping. Like, Alice, don't try to save Agatha. And now, in her head was something like, teenager, if you had Wanda's power, why didn't you save Alice? Since the sigil has now been broken since they last spoke, and Lilia has calmed down, she remembers the face as this boy from the bar mitzvah, and based on Billy's reaction, this is a new thing for him as he realizes he and Lilia had crossed paths before the accident. Jen says that she's moved on about Billy's actions.
At your prompting, Dory.
So Agatha has apparently seen Finding Nemo and is making fun of Lilia for being forgetful due to her lapsing, as Dory is forgetful. Now, two things I have with this. What if Dory wasn't just forgetful, but was actually lapsing through time? Also, what if Agatha never saw Finding Nemo and only ever saw Finding Dory, like some kind of psychopath? But Agatha's saying this, and Jen saying the flow of time is an illusion, right? Tells Lilia that they must be after that moment with Jen and Lilia in the tunnel, and that sometime in between then and now, Lilia has told all of them, including Agatha, to forgive Billy, and that it must have really freaked Billy out to have that forgiving Lilia for one moment followed by an angry version of Lilia returning. That's why he said, I thought we were cool, when she pushed him. Lilia explains why she placed the sigil on William.
I saw what was going to happen to you that night. I saw who you were and who you would become.
Lilia knew that William would experience a car accident and have his body taken over by the Scarlet Witch's son, and she only knew in that moment because we are going to see her flash back with that knowledge to give herself that idea in 2023, when this episode goes back to the tower reversed moment. So everyone panics as more swords fall, and since they aren't really participating in the tarot exercise, and in that panic, Lilia flashes back to the cabin sleepover in episode 5.
I hated this the first time!
Which we previously linked back to her moment in the kitchen in episode 2. But notice how Lilia doesn't fully relive that moment with Agatha and Billy in the kitchen. A detail I love here, now from Lilia's perspective, she turns back to Agatha and Billy to hear them say, looks like we came to the right place, and are you all right, ma'am? Which were actually in response to Lilia's initial scream, and now Lilia goes back into her panic saying, stop, 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 stop. And when you go back to watch episode 2's version of this, after Agatha and Billy say those lines, Lilia does turn her back to them and she kind of waves them off.
Are you all right, ma'am?
So that was really Lilia lapsing away from them for just a moment to loop back to her Maestra. And I love that they planted all these little placeholders in there from the beginning. The Maestra asks what Lilia's life is like 450 years in the future. Lilia says that she's not rooted in nature, that she's not nimble at her craft, that she has no coven, and that she's better off as a fraud and a hermit. Because her memory of William reminded her of her gig as a middle-aged fortune teller at kids' parties, she doesn't yet have the confidence to complete the task, and thus must go back through another loop of everything. This Maestra session includes a side view of this table, which Brandon spotted has a Latin phrase, nave expeditus sistam celer quam ventus. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but it appears to translate to be as swift as the wind in your ship, or as the wind in your sails. Another instance of a witch as a vessel, which makes us think of Lilia Calderu as a possible ship of Theseus. Like she must lean back into the most troubling phase of her youth because that wear and tear on the planks was the most identity-forming part of her life. The Maestra says,
your task is not to control, but to see.
And from the Maestra's point of view, we look directly into the sunlight, which takes Lilia back to the tunnels, and not back to her previous check-in with Jen, which would give her all the answers, but after it, when she's still in the blind. She can't even inform Jen that the next trial is tarot because Jen already has that info. Jen is really just running laps around her with bits about champagne brunches that Lilia missed.
Oh, well, you did miss out on the champagne brunch back there.
Really?
No.
It's a good bit, but it's also a little clue of what Lilia really needs. Some camaraderie of drinking with her girlfriends like they did in episode 3.
I love you guys.
What's missing is a coven, as we learn. Lilia finds Billy's spellbook, which he lost in episode 5, sometime during the Hexenbessen flight. In this light, we can see a band across the center of it that shows the phases of the moon. Just another example of something from Billy's life corresponding to the design of the witch's road. Lily and Jen find shelving, their access point to the castle trial. So in an episode about Luke being back in a predestined timeline, we must reference the bookshelf of Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. Remember, Christopher Nolan used Murph's bookcase as Cooper's window through time, and the way the beams of light streak through the books here recalls the lines of gravity through the book pages that Cooper could kind of pluck to communicate to Murph through time in Morse code. That bookcase is really an important symbol because it represents how all the answers we need in our lives can actually be found right in front of us, right there on the bookshelf, if you just crack open a damn book. If we can just open our minds to the possibilities in those pages. This shelving also functions as a eureka of illumination for Lilia, because for the first time, she's able to will herself to a precise moment she wants to get to, the moment Billy invoked her. It actually kind of recalls Gandalf's line in Fellowship.
A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
But Lilia's version of that is this.
Relax, baby. We're cool.
This was the "we're cool" that gave Billy his assumption in the earlier scene. And Lilia, having lived through that future fight, now is just saying "we're cool" really is a way to apologize to Billy and to make peace. Lilia now confidently takes charge of the tarot challenge. Billy steps up as the querent.
Me, I guess I'm the querent.
Yeah, Agatha always shits on Billy's jokes, like she did when he welcomed the coven back in episode 2 with the little pieces of granola bars. Billy asks his question.
Am I William or am I Billy?
Interesting. So he only has secondhand fragments of memories from before 2023, and he will likely have to realize his history in the final 2 episodes so that really he can be both Billy and William. Lilia explains a safe passage spread. Center, the first card, the Traveler. The top front card is what's missing. Back to the dealer's right is a path behind, wounds suffered, lessons learned. Back to the dealer's left, the path ahead, a space for growth and discovery. Center right, obstacles. Center left, windfall. And directly center atop the initial card is the destination. Billy begins to draw the cards. His Traveler is the Magician, meaning enormous potential and the ability to turn all your goals into reality, kind of like Wanda's ability to manifest her reality. This Magician card is a red robe and a type of crown that Wiccan wears in the comics. What's missing is the sun, meaning good fortune, joy, reunion. Could also be wordplay as the son, as in Wanda's other son, Tommy, because it is Tommy that Billy wants a reunion with. Now, Billy tries to draw the path behind card, but there's another sword directly above Lilia, and Agatha tackles her out of the way, which bookends with the moment we talked about earlier, when Agatha was on top of her.
Agatha?
And now we know that the end of the word bag ended in that G sound, which is going to be the beginning of get off me. Instead, Lilia lapses back to Agatha's basement back in episode 2 when she says that.
Get off me!
And I assume you've all been catching it, but every time Lilia lapses from one moment in history to another, it comes with this audio chime effect that kind of sounds like an inverted chime.
Get off me!
So now the camera just swings around the backs of the other instances this coven was all together, and we transition behind someone's back to the weird moment at the campfire in episode 4.
You know, we really kind of hated each other in the beginning, but now...
But now?
Huh?
Lilia! Where do you go?
But here, Lilia continues to smoothly drift to the other untethered moment from episode 3.
You know, we really hated each other from the beginning, but now... I love you guys.
And the camera continues turning back to Lilia with her Maestra for the 3rd time. If Lilia was so confident with tarot, why does she still not have control over her slipping? Well, in good story structure, this is really the take step of the story. According to Dan Harmon's story circle, you have to give the hero a taste of what they're seeking, and we're almost home, but you have to push them one step further to really make them earn it. Lilia confesses the true reason she stopped listening to her divination powers is that as a girl, she foresaw a fever coming to wipe out their coven, and she was powerless to stop it, probably referring to the great Italian plague that was a version of the bubonic plague of previous centuries that hit around that time of Lilia's youth. This is what Lily saw in her vision in episode 3 when Rio as Death made her first true form appearance on this series. The Maestra shrugs and says,
"That comes for us all."
This is what Lilia had said while passing Agatha and Billy back in episode 5 after Agatha killed Alice.
Death comes for us all.
I love the idea that Lilia already knew the answer, she just needed to hear it again. And so now, the camera swings the other direction from before to the left now, and rather than it being a lapsed transition, Lilia stays in this moment.
I was falling. I will fall.
Her mysterious plunge was not a forgotten memory, it's her future destiny. Knowledge and acceptance of one's fate is one of the most powerful gifts, because now you can plot out every move of your endgame. And so now, Lilia sees the code of the Matrix. She loops back to the very first moment that had eluded her, the moment after she and Lilia had splatted in the tunnel after Billy threw them in the mud. I love the makeup detail of making Patty and Sashir the muddiest now to signal this to the viewer. It's so satisfying to see Lilia just finally rattle off all the context that she had been fishing from Jen throughout the episode.
The son of the Scarlet Witch telepathically kicked us off the road. We sank beneath the surface, and now we're here. Agatha is in the trial with Billy. Son of the Scarlet Witch, try to keep up. It's a divination trial. Tarot. We've got to find the bookshelf.
And I love this because it's all a relieved, rushed rant from Lilia, and it just comes out as a verbal exposition dump that Jen would just take in, but obviously naturally dole out in tiny increments to Lilia, and there later walks down the tunnel. But what I also love about it is if you were to order this chronologically, we as viewers would probably cringe at this clunky exposition dump and call it bad writing. But now, in an inverted structure, as a character so relieved to have all the answers, it comes out as catharsis. So now when Lilia looks ahead, she sees two paths, one with the yellow routes that would take them under the road to the castle, another to a subway station, the one that Jen mentioned before. This train car has a sign reading WV Metro, presumably Westview Metro. Sharon talks about this metro line back in episode 3.
All I would have expected to see down here were remnants of our failed public transit system.
It's not clear if this is a literal train line or just kind of a magical manifestation of the road, but it seems like it's kind of designed to be an escape hatch, an exit door. The fact that there's even an exit door, though, to the Witch's Road makes me think even more that Agatha was on the road before, but maybe even took or built this early exit before she could finish the road. The Salem 7 passed through, and the way their hoods are draped over their headpieces that go behind their heads kind of looks as though their giant heads are bowed forward, but they're walking backwards. This group has always looked very creepy. And now that Lilia sees her own version of the road ahead of her, she loops back to the castle. The road winds out of time, she says. She gathers up the cards and she casts herself as a traveler. This montage of the cards that Lilia flips are all exact recreations of the tarot cards that we have seen all season long. And each of the times she exclaimed these cards in past episodes all align now to form her safe passage. The answers were there all along. The Traveler is the Queen of Cups, with young Lilia realizing her mastery over tea leaf reading. What's missing? The Three of Pentacles, community, the singular voices waiting to harmonize, because Lilia needs a coven of friends. We see her Three of Pentacles eviction notice, where she wrote the coven list in episode 2. The path behind, the Knight of Wands. Alice makes the same pose with her arms that the knight makes with the staff on the card. Actually, that eagle shield above the knight on the card was also on the flag that I just snapped off from the lowering ceiling, representing Alice's death. The path ahead, the High Priestess. We see Jen standing in front of the painting glowing just like the High Priestess on the card, and that's why Lilia tells her that she's the path ahead as her gift on the way out. Obstacles, the Three of Swords. We see Agatha from Lilia's vantage point at the end of episode 4 when 3 branches were behind her forming that shape as she was grieving over Billy's near death. And the Windfall, the Tower reversed. The Fall. We see Lilia's view of William in the tent and his future form of Billy with the tower reversed in the crystal ball, which leads her to the destination. And now the episode structure does something very clever. We lapse back even earlier, the exact moment of the splat, the truth that was hidden from her all along, but in plain sight. Rio steps forward from the darkness, and Lilia remembers that hot mic moment in episode 4, the death spelled out on the Ouija board in episode 5, and now stands Aubrey Plaza as Mistress Death in the exact pose of the Death Tarot card, dagger in one hand, black heart in the other. Interesting design though, half of her face is twisted into a skull because, Death is a hooded skull as we see in the Thor Love and Thunder Cosmic Entity Chamber, but they keep Aubrey Plaza's eyes because her eyes are just so huge, so iconic. We need to also recognize her as Aubrey. And notice how she is wearing a green crown, as she is the original Green Witch. Realizing that death is the destination, retracts the sword ceiling, the Iron Maiden opens, and a new tunnel with green roots is on the other side, signaling the final leg of the road being a battle of Agatha versus Rio/Death, which trailer shots have shown will be set under a green shaded sky. Like the Wizard and the Wizard of Oz, Lilia leaves each of them with a gift. She tells Agatha,
when she calls you a coward, hit the deck.
The mid-season trailer showed Agatha ducking under some piece of debris that blasted out toward her in her fight with Rio. She returns Billy's spellbook to him, a spellbook that, we should remember, contained the Latin phrase, "It's not easy being green," which this show's language consultant confirmed directly to me on Twitter was not a joke of her own, but an order directly from the show's producers. So I think it's actually a clue. Lilia tells Jennifer that she's the path ahead, and yes, Jen must have some role to play. A promo poster showed Sashir in the morgue trial. Jessica Clemens theorized that the morgue will be where Death stores all of her reclaimed souls. The Salem 7 rat crawls out of the bookshelf. Now, Gina Ippolito actually identified all these. We see Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, Volume 2, Tom Burke, Volume 2 by Charles James Lever, Edward Bulmer Lytton's Layla, aka The Siege of Granada, Volume 36, that same author's Paul Clifford, and What Will He Do With It, Volume 9, John Glasworthy's Under Agit, a book by N.F.S. Grundtvig, a Dutch philosopher, poet, and historian in the early 19th century, Jep Echtger's Stammelid Dict 3, Kaj Munk Mundegaves Dagen in de Artkler, and then Raquel Welch's autobiography Beyond the Cleavage, which is Gina's favorite detail in our favorite episode. The animal forms of the Salem 7 enter the room, and we see the crow fly overhead, and then there's this cool shot where we actually cut back to Patti LuPone as the camera swings around her, and the human forms of the Salem 7 are already set in that shot, standing up. Lilia flips the tower, which was previously inverted, to now be upright to represent sudden upheaval, and the tower defies gravity. Interestingly, we also see the hourglass turn, suggesting that, hey, maybe Lilia might have actually given herself more time. While all of the Salem 7 fall initially, we do only see 5 of them hit the sword's surface. These could be just the ones who fill the frame of the shot, and they want to imply that all of them died. I think all probably are dead, but we did note on the break room that 2 of them can turn into animals that fly, the crow and the cicada. And the Tower Tarot card shows 2 figures exiting the tower. Lilia hangs from the table and she decides to let go. Like Natasha Romanoff, her hand was clutching right on the word path, because now she's leaving her place in the path by her own choice. In the opening shot, Lilia was panicked as she fell, but now a look of relief and elation fills her face. We don't see her hit the swords, but we have to assume this is her end. She's not falling, she's ascending into clarity and into vision. And as this is an episode about time not having a linear end, one of the few liberating aspects of predestination is that it grants us a form of immortality, because we constantly circle back through our beginnings. For Lilia, she goes back to her very first step on her path to becoming a witch.
Let us begin.
And so in a way, when we die, we never really die. We just kind of go back through our life and learn new lessons. The credits music is Jim Croce's Time in a Bottle, which was also featured in X-Men Days of Future Past, the scene when Evan Peters as Quicksilver speeds so fast through the circular kitchen of the Pentagon prison that time, from our point of view, slowed nearly to a stop. Such a fun nod to Evan Peters, but also perfectly encapsulates the desire to control time, which Lilia finally bottles in this episode. Now, I went into this episode thinking that it would be like Lost to the Constant. In some ways, the way Desmond Hume and Lily Calderu experience time as unstuck is similar, but thematically, these episodes are about very different things. The Constant is about finding purpose in the middle of one's life to love another. Death's Hand in Mine on Agatha is about finding purpose in the twilight of one's life, purpose in death. Death does come for us all, and we all reach a point in our lives where we fear that we might be past our prime, thinking that the best things we'll ever do are behind us. But you never know. The final minutes of your life, the wisdom and gifts that you bequeath to your survivors on your way out the door, sometimes that is the most important thing that any of us will ever do. You have to live for those final minutes. And sometimes just the simplicity of what that mission is can give the rest of our very confusing lives perfect 20/20 hindsight and clarity. Now, forgive me for putting Interstellar in your head again, but you know, there is a Dylan Thomas quote, "Do not go gently into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at the close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light." After this episode, I prefer the MISTRESS version.
I will fall.
Yes. What will you do with your remaining time?
Big thanks to Brandon Barrett, Gina Ippolito, and Noah Chen for their help researching this video. And a reminder to get 20% off Delete Me consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/rockstars and use promo code Rockstars at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/rockstars and use code Rockstars. Thank you, Delete Me, for sponsoring this video. Comment down below with your thoughts, follow me at EA Voss, and subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.